Bravehearts, Urbanites, Coach Mad Hatters, Vineyard Creatrix, Crimson Velvet VIPs. Have you ever wondered what the term "we are amongst gods" truly mean on a earthling plane? So I have been stepping outside of my comfort zone and doing my best to increase the moments when I give my authentic expression by which I view this world through my lens. And so I often tell the folks that I am really close to, or the ones that really have ownership of my heartstrings, I tell them I do wish you could see you the way I see you. So I have three grown godlings. And the incredible thing is, only through my long term timeline with pain and understanding my alchemical privilege to transmute this pain into pleasure. So, for a long while, I was on this journey. And to make things simplistic, this journey I have entitled and am entitled to call it my journey of self discovery. At the beginning of this journey, which started in 2011, the only thing that it kept saying to me, like the little nudge, was know thyself, know thyself, know thyself. And even though I reference the film or the storyline, The Matrix, a lot, it has its physical and its metaphysical meanings to me. And so for a long while, I became obsessive with the decoding and the explanations of the Matrix and just wanted to hear from all sorts of people of how they view the film and what it meant to me, what it meant to them in regards to what it would mean to me and how they were connecting the dots as a means of dissecting and digesting this film. Because we all know, well, we should know that when a story is told, whether it's audio or visual or both, there is a front side and there is a back side. As with anything in this physical realm, there is a light side, there is a dark side. And dark side does not mean evil, spooky, unsavory, or whatever else that wants to be attached to the dark side versus a day side and a night side, or a uh, visual side and a non-visual side. So for a long while, I knew that my sensibilities were of a nocturnal frequency. I knew that I had sight in the darkness, even in my physical world. Me and my dad giggle a lot because we're the two people that will walk through the house with no lights on. And I know a lot of it comes by way of us being in this home since my days of my granddad. But I also know that the trust in being able to feel your way through the darkness gains a certain kind of power by which you will navigate. And so I started to be able to distinguish in certain behavior patterns, whether it was with me or those that I was observing, how certain people will immediately want to turn on the lights. Some folks I know can't even fall asleep without some type of light or TV or something going on inside of their spaces. And then there are folks like me who must sleep in darkness and silence. So there is this meridian, and I'll say a dividing line for the sake of context, but not specifically a dividing line. But there is this demarcation with regards to trust in oneself when it is in this thing we call the subconscious realm, or the triple darkness, or even the shades of darkness. Mainstream has us so conditioned throughout our vocabulary and the way we define and communicate with ourselves and each other. It always has this good or evil twinge to it, as if the way we see the world must be stuffed in either one of those channels, never blending, never stitching. So, the way I see my godlings, and that's exactly what they are, and the way American society will have me see my children, quote unquote, two totally different things. And only through my pain was this lens created. And it was always through the means of me being so called absent, and how we seem to fuel our conflicts according to what society says a mom or a dad should be and what it is that they should be doing in relationship to their offspring. And most of it is surrounded around the material things and the financial comfiness of a child's life. No one ever speaks about the energetic values or the energetic inheritance of our children. And so I did uh, a segment. As a matter of fact, I did two. So I did one segment that's called Daddy Issues. I have not released that yet. And trust me when I say it is not in context of the way that mainstream will have us look at daddy issues. It is more so from the eyes of the child, and how me, as being someone who had a childhood without my dad's presence, and the way that that has permeated, and the strength that it has given me, and the timing. So I've been a stickler about divine timing. Anyone who has taken even an ounce of interest in who I am and what I stand for knows that I have these certain tender spots around my maturity and divine timing. And so Maya Angelou would speak often about how her mom was a better mom to her adult self versus her child self, and that their relationship actually began to blossom once she became an adult, and who her mom was to her during those times. And so I began to ponder this thing that says, what if one parent was divinely timed to be front line and center in the earlier part of the child's life? And what if the other parent was supposed to chime in on the back end? And honestly, that too covers the offspring full circle, versus us constantly chiming into this concept that says that co parenting means that they both have to be side by side and always in alignment with the other in order for the child to get full range. I beg to differ. So here's one of my tender bits. I used to, oh my goodness, I used to be so obsessed with wondering, why did my mom play so many power plays? And I don't say this in any type of arrogance or sorrow or scrutiny to my mom's life and the way her happenstances unfolded. But I do mean it in terms of my truth, always wondering, why did my mom insert her power every time it came to me and my dad's relationship? What was that about? And it wasn't just me. So I have many siblings from my mom and from my dad. And I have seen in full term, real time, how these subtleties actually keeps certain frequencies at bay. And because I am a very intentional person, and I really do believe intention has more power than we give it credit for, then I will say with this, in all sincerity, I do not believe that my mom, all of my mom's intentions were to keep this frequency between daughter and dad splintered. I do not believe that. But I do believe that being twined up in all the complexities of raising children, that the way we see our calls of duty with raising the children, the ratios of nurture and nature, and how that harmonizes and plays out, sometimes, oftentimes, gets interrupted, and then there's this arrested development around the child's fundamental frequencies. So in my era of being so upset with her, she was the custodial parent, but most often my environment as a child was always interrupted with her anger and how things was playing out and her dissatisfaction as a result. And so some of that bled into my world. And so one of the things that I used to often say was, I wish my mom would have got out the way and stopped needing to control the whole kit and caboodle. So one of the hard things that I had to do, and it's a very intimate testimony, very tender wish that I had, with wondering what type of person would I be had my mom not been in the position to move to execute these power plays. And so one of the hardest things I had to do, and yes, I have to say, it began with my anger of wanting to do something different from what my mom had done or what her girlfriends had done, or not all women, but the majority of the women that I saw that figured that they had to do this, that, and the third. And that's the way that it was dressed. But the more and more I began to analyze it, it was, no, you didn't. But it was one of those things where we're saving face. We have certain reputations to uphold. We have certain things as women that goes along with this societal narrative that says that we must be in control of everything. And even though I started out with this anger, and what I said was, I'm going to give my children what I did not have. And it had nothing to do with material, it had everything to do with energy. And the energetic frequencies that will ultimately blossom, endorse, endow my children as they get older is a solid childhood. And so I'm forever grateful for me now. I wasn't throughout this thing. Throughout this thing was me having to deal with all the rumors of me being a deadbeat mom and all the rumors of she don't care about her children. No one knew what my sacred plea was and how that plea set me out on a totally separate journey, but it took care of the question of, Thea, what if you the problem? What if you are the problem? How are you going to handle this to make sure that your children's frequency does not get interrupted through all of your anger? Now, most often when I bring this type of situation up in a group of women, it has been an equal divide between those that honestly understood where I was coming from and then those that would mistake it for me blaming and shaming or trying to throw shade. But at the end of the day, what I know to be truth, especially while I am inside of my Chiron return. And the Chiron return is similar to a Saturn return. And the Saturn return happens around age 29, 30. And I know exactly where I was at the time when I was dealing with my Saturn return, even though I didn't know what that was. In hindsight, and now that I've been able to study certain frequencies, I understand and was able to precisely pinpoint everything that I was studying and reading with regards to the Saturn return and where I was and what was happening with me. So here we are now at my Chiron return, which happens between ages 49 to 51. So come January, I will be on the last leg of my Chiron return. And Chiron in mythology is the wounded healer. And so when I was in my early years of bearing children, my oldest son is 31. And I knew nothing about my anger. I knew nothing about my deeply embedded abandonment issues. I knew nothing about my trust frequencies. I didn't have words for them. All I had was feelings. So all I had was my emotions and my intuitive values around how I was feeling as an independent girl. Not yet a woman, a girl. I had my first son at 19. He is now 31. So as I started to unpeel and or peel back and unpack, it really started to hurt me when I said, okay, I am a derivative of my mom, and I have inherited her anger and her outbursts and her frequencies to lunge and dominate arguments or disagreements. And so that was hard. It was hard to have to get really into the eye of these storms. I had to teach myself to look at things from different angles. I do not believe that it's by mistake that my two major careers involved me having countless conversations with a whole bunch of different types of people, whether I agree with them or not. Having these conversations, if it did nothing else, it lent me living examples of how things could go. And for a long time, a lot of that which I felt was opposing my stance made me agitated. It ruffled my feathers to no end. And then still, I was being challenged to become the defense attorney for certain angles of life. So I look at my children right now, as you look at them, what I see is two Aquariuses and a Virgo. And so to take it even deeper, I see versions of Uranus and Mercury. Being able to look at my children in this realm, in this lens, has produced a certain respect that I would have never had if I constantly stayed in the mind frame. I am your parent, I am your authority. Don't embarrass me. You need to live up to my expectations. Like, that's the type of mom I would have been had I not been removed from their raising. So let's go just a tidbit deeper, and then I'm going to close out because I didn't intend to make this long. But epiphanies are firing off right now. And so I just wanted to share just the tip of the iceberg when I say that context actually do matter. Shout out to Dr. Carr. Context matters. And so if we do not begin to demand the context. And I don't mean demand context from others. I mean demand context from oneself, meaning suspend the preconceived notions, suspend the judgment, suspend the arrogance to say, I know because I know, and sit down and have these really true, intricate types of conversations with self to say, am I overbearing? Am I stifling? Am I smothering? Am I unfair? I often say that I cringe when I hear women say, I ain't your friend, I'm your mama. What's wrong with being my friend? Your authority would probably seep in a little bit more deeper if it didn't always feel like you didn't like me. I'm in your way. I'm stopping you from doing this type of this, that, and the third. I am the splinter and you living your best life. And because of that, growing up, I was always the type that I would never force myself on anyone. I would never demand anybody's attention. I would never demand anybody's presence. I never felt entitled to engage with anyone. And I took very, very precise attention to those that were around me of their own true regard. I even had a moment in life where I would be the greatest asshole just to see who was genuine and who wasn't. Because usually, love, you can't flip it on and off like a switch. Now, I wouldn't become abusive, but I would become outlandish. And I am, I am the youngest of my sibling tribe from my mom's side. And so there's 10 years between me and my twin brothers, and then everyone else is older. So me being the youngest, always being portrayed as the runt, always figuring like I had to prove myself because my siblings are outstanding. You hear me? All of them, regardless if they have material, what would be considered material success or financial independent, they all show up as the Queen of Wands, the Queen of Pentacles, the King of Swords, the King of Wands. That's the way they show up to me nowadays. And to see them in accordance to an archetype also has lended me a greater perspective by why or when they do some of the things they do or don't do. And so I'm forever grateful that I have taken the more harder road, the road less traveled, and many times traveled by myself with no one else to hash this out with or brainstorm with or kick the bobo or chew the fat or whatever you want to call it. It was me, myself, and I. And we held Congress challenging the way I viewed and defined things. When I look at my children, I am looking at Uranus times two. Both of my sons are Aquariuses. So I look at Uranus times two plus Mercury. And when I say looking at them and regarding them in this light, when they show up in conversation, I see the wisdom, even if it is delivered in what folks will call the younger generation. I wonder what would happen if many parents, especially with this uh, this authoritarian uh, authority. It's not sounding right. Authoritarian, this dictatorship, this ruletarian, this stance that says I know better than you about your life, versus come sit down and tell me what's going on with you in your world. How are you weathering this? How are you weathering that? Now, I will say in honesty that this is still a new groove that I am finding myself in entering. Well, I'm across the threshold now and it is beginning to fortify. But lo and behold, with this I am being granted this this site, this particular, it's a peculiar sight to me that even when I see others and how they engage with their children and how there are parents that honestly care about what the other one says and then with the other one, meaning with their children, not regards to the co-parent. That's a whole nother topic story for another time. Watch for it. It's going to be titled Daddy Issues, and it is not issues with a girl that's torn. It's about the issues of a girl who's traveling through her inner dialogues to be her dad's defense attorney. And for her to be able to honor and take insight and take stock in the sites that she saw growing up from her point of view without any major influence, that she got really clear on how she felt about her dad. And I remember there was a time when I wanted to take both of my parents off the hook because they themselves have their own lives and challenges and frequencies that they are plagued with and dilemmaed by. And even though it might not look like love, I am almost certain that it is. And usually the narrative that says your parent cares nothing for you is coming from somebody else. If we were to really dial back for a moment and understand what the one on one relationship is, and usually the absence has something to do with divine timing. And I've seen many examples where the children and the non custodial parent is finding the context that says it wasn't your time on the front end, it was your time on the back end. But only that could be seen if we zoomed out, looked at things from a panoramic point of view to say that some mutual funds will not mature until this time or that time, or the parent shows up and save the day on this day or that day, and how all of that still harmonizes and builds a rooting system that offspring will be able to use as news that regenerates and regenerates and regenerates. Because sometimes I wonder, it's like your daddy don't care nothing about you. Then it has made me challenge, like, do I say that or did I hear somebody else say that? Did I hear my daddy say that? Or am I hearing somebody else say that? So this is here where I insert into the conversation the invitation to begin looking at our offsprings as the solidarity of the celestial, and that being the vehicle by which my three gods now is living an earthly experience, it checks my well, let me see. Okay, it checks my senses of entitlement when I figure that my children do not have the wherewithal or the awareness to make decisions for themselves by which they see the world, and that I could do better by checking in to reconcile, mm, with good confidence through our conversations, knowing how they see the world. And then it also does a checks and balance that does this thing that threads together the new school and the old school. And that can only be done in harmony. And it can only be done when we take authority off the table. And even inside of mentorships, or coaching relationships or even romantic relationships. Because remember, as our offsprings get older, they too enter into relationships. Well, they too will have to become the observer and the one that respects the different point of view through all of the aspects, all of the context, all of it, all of it. So now, in this time, in this space, I see young adults that are coming into or in essence of my older son has always been inside of this frequency of freedom to be them, and they understand the rules of engagement where they are to behave and conduct under these circumstances, and then under these circumstances there's a little bit more flexibility inside of the frequency of respect for their elders, their aunties, their uncles, even their parents, because we all have this rippling effect of what would be considered good and bad, and we all come with kinks and dents and some flaws, and a lot of it is due through blind spots and shortcomings. And so when the lens is able to be forefront and center, I know, at least for me, when I speak to my children, I am speaking to Uranus and Mercury. And I say all of this not to coerce you or demand, even though that's not even my style, but just put it out there because sometimes things get misconstrued. You're not able to put the full context in these short tidbits of sound bites or these slivers or slices of comprehension. So it's mainly a patchwork. And this patchwork for me has been that shift in paradigm has allowed me to render the respect that's due. I'm very quick to apologize. I'm very quick to understand they are individuals in their own right. I'm very quick to know that they do not see the world as I've seen the world, and that some of the things that they see, I probably will be slow to see, and vice versa. Even me talking to them about the time when there were pagers and the big ass mobile phones and the phones that were attached in the vehicles, or even landlines or rotary dial, or back in the day when groceries was real food, and when when their grandma would had a community garden. So there are things sight unseen that you take the authority piece out and off the table, that you'll be able to fill the table with a lot more intricacies that go into this tapestry. So I think and I feel inside of my heart of hearts. And let me just say the same thing is happening with my siblings and their children. I'm witnessing. I'm witnessing the reversal of certain curses in real time. See, nobody knows what a mom prays for, what a dad prays for. And they're always in the peripheral talking shit. And it's amazing. And no, I'm not talking about anything that's happening with me right now. I am speaking as a cardinal Capricorn. So this is Saturn. And I knew starting in 2018 that we would be dealing with frequencies that was going to demand balance. And so between then and now, I have been constantly speaking about the balance and the ability to take people off the hook, because if we are only going to focus on topical, superficial, surface shit, we are going to continue to do ourselves an injustice by willfully neglecting to know that there are things deeper. We continue to be talking about The symptoms. Social media social media is full of the scrutiny of the symptoms. And ain't nobody talking about the sores. Nobody. So I will end it here. And I will say that we are all going to be continued to be challenged and charged with the assignment of understanding that we do not and are not and have not ever been fighting against flesh and blood. Now, would it churns out into the physical world? Would it ends up occurring? Okay, well, that's just what happens when things are output into this physical realm. And this physical realm never, ever, ever promised us the easy button or convenience or luxury. Now, it's part of it, which means you can weave in and out of it throughout your lifetime, but it's never promised you one thing over the other. It honestly is the smorgasbord by which light and dark may dwell in the same space. We talk about America being the mixing bowl. The third dimension is the mixing bowl. The whole kit and caboodle is a fucking mixing bowl. And from inside out is how things weave and unfold and harmonize and synthesize. So that's my spiel for the day. I wonder who's going to take upon this challenge and begin looking at their children as gods. And not gods in the religious sense, gods in the astrological sense. Dick Gregory said in an interview that he began counting himself anew when he understood that he was the vehicle by which his children got here, but not necessarily their authority, because they too have an earthling experience that they came to experience, which is one of the reasons why it's blossoming the whole be yourself, know thyself, stand firm in your truth. All of that is not by mistake, it's not by happenstance. And we are a collective of these archetypes. And a small smidget of Saturn, a small smidget of Uranus, a small smidget of Venus, a small smidget of Mercury, and inside of a being dwells this cosmic cocktail that makes up you. And in my opinion, certain parental authorities stifle certain offsprings to really truly come here and experience what it is they came here to experience, because we've been conditioned amongst this American motif that says there is a dream that you must pursue. You got to hustle, hustle, get the bag. Nothing else matters. Long as you can show up clean and pristine, nothing else matters. And then with that narrative, so much of the more intricate, more invaluable stuff lays by the wayside. And then when that begins to corrupt and brew conflict, we don't understand why. We don't understand why we are now faced with this mountainous ordeal of fuckery that now has to be contended with and nurtured just the same and analyzed and comprehended. So, yeah, I'm going to snap my fingers on that one. So, here's to you and your point of view. I wish you well.